Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news. Today is Friday, July 5th. I'm moving forward towards hopefully the right direction in this medium emergency that I'm in, so it looks like things might be going in a better direction, but they did also lead to me wanting to really start streaming a lot earlier today, and so today is going to be a late night stream, or start a little bit later than what I would have preferred. We've got several things new in the shop, and they've updated the Duel Pass rewards, which I'm not going to buy the gold Duel Pass until we have just like a couple of days left. That way I know whether or not I'm playing enough Yu-Gi-Oh at this point to justify doing this. So the goal is to get to level 100 in the next 73 days, then I'll buy gold at the very last second, which is the exact right move where they are selling it right now. The only other thing for purchase is this. And I am kind of rolling in gems, so. But yeah, even when you like purchase this, you then have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different screens to even get to the point. Just scroll down and set that. And then exit even a little bit, you're going back one screen, and then I can go check out the proficiency test, which we have a proficiency test here. I'm not really accomplishing much. Let's just go with a guess here. And part of that certainly is the problem of the Nancy Drew game that I'm playing is just really slow. It does feel like it might be slightly better than the two previous games I've covered that were in a different genre, a different brand, but only in that the story feels a little bit they feel a little bit more linear in the story. Whereas, yeah, there's still a lot of mini games and just super simple puzzles. Just doesn't feel like there's a lot of meat on the bone for the Nancy Drew games. It feels like it's for really young kids, and it is then going to be incredibly dated. As far as just being a very old game and not really standing up. Inherently, if I was Her Interactive, which I assume owns the rights outright of the Nancy Drew licensings of video games, if I was them, I would take the general scripts, which are way too simple, reanimate everything in a 2D animation process, make it mobile games, and perhaps have either ads run on the mobile games or have a lot of DLC, so that that the cases yeah, I'm not really trying to pay attention to this. I'm just trying to randomly guess, and it's going to take me multiple tries to get this right. But yeah, I think bringing in 2D animation would modernize it quite a bit. Whereas back in the day, 3D animation was just pretty much demanded for those kinds of games. And inherently, I think they probably should that they probably should remake all the games to get rid of a lot of the time wasting grindiness, perhaps have some more uniform puzzles throughout each game, because what it feels like to me now on the third Nancy Drew game is that they try and copy and paste a lot of stuff, but then they put a lot of effort into making little mini games each time, and then in the two previous games they let's just guess here. Well, we got 5 out of 8 just guessing, and yeah, I really just could not care to actually learn any of this. Most of these cards are not things you would play with. And the annoyance here is that this mastery duel is just going to keep on going. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is just going to... They're going to just find ridiculous reasons to bring this higher and higher, and we're not going to get to like level 15 or level 20 at some point, and then be declared to have full mastery of Yu-Gi-Oh! Here we have an extreme duel. Duels are played with continuous traps, card, skull, invitation placed on the field. And we'll see what happens if we just copy my standard deck and play. We need 3 victories. Decent chance here that we will just get all 3 victories. In particular, the creature of Kapu Island, or Kapu Cave, whatever it's called as far as Nancy Drew, it introduces the idea that you can at points call the Hardy Boys and play as the Hardy Boys, which just wastes the time even more. And it does, like, I spent the 3rd hour of gameplay, spending a whole hour doing little mini game nonsense, mostly fishing. Yeah, almost all of the hour was fishing as one of the Hardy Boys. And undoubtedly there's a lot of time wasty stuff. And then the more bespoke puzzles that you're going to solve only once are just way too short and way too simple. There isn't a lot of conversation that happens, and definitely there's at least over half of the conversations are just linear cutscene like conversations. They aren't things that are going to make you choose different lines of dialogue or form really any kind of relationships. Nancy Drew as a visual novel probably makes a little bit more sense, particularly if it was just a kinetic visual novel. And that would be the default thought to do with it, is get rid of all the gameplay and just make it kinetic visual novels. And since we see that there is massive success for at least Japanese visual novels on Steam, it would make a lot of sense to try and compete with some Western Nancy Drew visual novels, kinetic visual novels, translate it, sell it back to the Japanese and other countries, and you might have kind of a significant amount of success there. So we could do this. Just toss this, and then I could have just destroyed this and destroyed that, but why not just do this instead? Well, now, inherently though, there is a problem here, in that my deck that I'm playing here is pretty built around getting things into the graveyard, so this is a pretty poor deck to play with for this strategy. Meanwhile, the only other thing I've really done is I watched yet another episode of The Boys, which isn't, watching it on a weekly basis is not something that I think is particularly great as an experience, and particularly for this season, which perhaps is hitting the message too well, and as such it is getting to be a little too obvious. One thing in particular, which I guess I can say is a spoiler if you haven't seen the most recent episode, but honestly shouldn't have been a spoiler in the first place, is the fact that one of the characters has been hallucinating his dead wife, and then he started talking to another person that pretty obviously was also a hallucination, and they've been playing that trick for 3 episodes, and frankly I just don't think the writers of the show are as smart as they think they are, because it was blatantly obvious that that was a hallucination. The biggest issue there, I would say, is that the character who is hallucinating is notoriously known for going it alone, and they had already established that he had brain problems and hallucinations, so they would have needed to establish that he sometimes deals with other people, and that sometimes people just show up, for that to even possibly have been a little bit sneaky. But no, it was pretty much obvious the first time I saw the new person that he was a hallucination. A lot of that probably comes down to also the angles and the videography. When a director knows something, they will often shoot from a different angle, shoot in a different frame. Whereas it frankly might be better just to retcon it. Like, nobody, directors and writers are too afraid of being accused of just retconning information, and then nerds complaining that things don't quite line up. But yeah, it would be better, frankly, if the writer had said, alright, this whole character was going to show up, and then 4 episodes in he said, surprise to the director, the actors, the cameraman, everybody, this person's been dead this whole time, and now we need to shoot some new footage to show what really happened instead of what we showed you before. In that case, when you're already committing to lying to your audience and betraying your audience's trust, you need to just fully commit to that and lie to your audience and betray their trust. Don't do it half-heartedly. Alright. So, yeah. Each time I start with something like this, I can just destroy the 2 cards and then we're just playing basic Yu-Gi-Oh! No special twist happening here. Although inherently, these Triad duels are probably the best of the extra duels because you don't have to play them much. You can just move on with your life and get back to ranked play. But yeah. I've been watching a lot of Warehouse 13 still. There's one issue certainly with Warehouse 13 in that at the end of the first and second season they just have Christmas specials listed on Amazon Prime. And so you get this very abrupt break in between the seasons. You have like a cliffhanger season finale in season 2, then you have a Christmas special that can't possibly have occurred in between the events of season 2 and season 3, and then you come back from the cliffhanger in season 3. I guess Amazon Prime just doesn't have a great system to separate out the Christmas specials, which would probably benefit them if they did have that. And as I'm watching Amazon Prime, whether it's The Boys or Warehouse 13, it is just creating an annoyance in that there's a lot of Prime Day advertisements, which is still 11 days away, but I am, thinking about purchasing things and over preparing and over obsessing way too much on Prime Day sales, which in reality I think I might very well just buy one big thing and basically nothing else, which is the SwitchBot S10 Robo Vacuum and Robo Mop that connects to the plumbing in water intake and water output to refill itself. And even that is certainly a early adopter risky thing to buy. I'm kind of in a unique situation where I kind of need it, but if I could wait, it would make a lot more sense to wait 1 year and see how many people steal that idea from SwitchBot and come out with their own model next year at CES, because I imagine you will see several other people take the plumbed-in concept. It is a little surprising too that when you start to think about some of the annoyances of dehumidifiers, humidifiers, mops, all of those things really should be plumbed in, and they just aren't. There is no, as far as I can find, humidifier that is plumbed in that would have like a float valve to fill in, like the back of a tank of a toilet would fill. There is no dehumidifier that is plumbed in that would drain water. And the SwitchBot S10 is promising a humidifier and dehumidifier that would work with the robot vacuum, but I question that. Like, I question what the process really will be there because of the amount of water you're talking about there. The numbers, in my experience, don't seem like they would add up. First of all, if you have a dehumidifier and a humidifier, you're probably only going to use one at one point at a time. So there will be days, potentially, of high humidity that the dehumidifier would work, and then there would be possibly some nights where you'd have a humidifier on in a bedroom, but those probably aren't the same 24-hour period. So taking water from a dehumidifier to mop the floors is believable, but taking water from a dehumidifier and possibly doing several passes back and forth using a robot vacuum, because the tank on the robot vacuum isn't really going to be that big, to take water from a dehumidifier and put it into a humidifier, that's almost never going to happen. And going to a sink refill station, water refill station, for the robot vacuum to fill up a humidifier. That is something that again might just take multiple passes, 4, 5, 6 passes per day of it just going and refilling itself. Yeah. And see, my thought here is they may very well realize that if the robot vacuum, the SwitchBot S10, is going to be the middleman, it needs a much larger tank, like 4 or 5 times larger. Something so big that it would have to potentially pick it up and then use its batteries to lug a lot more, and then drop the large tank and go back to a smaller tank. And so that's just a kind of great example of don't buy things for what they potentially in the future can be, buy things for what they are now. I also wouldn't be surprised if the SwitchBot does eventually come out with a humidifier, dehumidifier, but decides to just plumb them in and recommend plumbing them in, so that the humidifier just automatically fills itself and becomes a secondary fill station in which the mop can get water for itself, and the dehumidifier is plumbed in so it drains and is just a secondary drain station for the mop, and that the mop itself would never actually pick up any water to take from one place to the other. It would just use those as charge stations or refill stations, which even in that still isn't a terrible thought of design. The only other prototype I've even seen so far would be washer machines or dryers, washing machine combos that have a RoboVac base station. Which that is an intriguing idea, but it wouldn't really work for my house because my washing machine and dryer hookups are actually in the garage. And that is another aspect to all of this, is none of these gadgets have places that have been architecturally designed for them. So putting a refill station or charge station for the SwitchBot S10 may be difficult, like with the spacing. You may end up putting it in a bathroom. You may end up putting it in front of a kitchen counter. You may end up having to drill holes to get the plumbing to go somewhere different. They want about 1 meter in front of the refill station to be free, whereas the other locations and elements aren't as big of a deal. I did actually take some measurements just to make sure it would fit under the toe kick of my kitchen sink, but it is actually fairly low. Although another aspect to the SwitchBot S10 is if you can't actually plumb it in the refill station, they will gladly sell you just a standard tank base, which then eliminates a major function. Of course, the biggest problem with the S10 is just the massive price. It's got a coupon on right now that's $400 off, but that just gets it down to about $700. You are buying a electric robot vacuum cleaner and mop at prices you would have paid, relatively speaking, back when vacuum cleaners were one of the most expensive appliances you'd ever buy. Which, yeah, the price of a regular vacuum cleaner just does not compare. You'll struggle to spend $100 on a decent cheap vacuum cleaner. And if you don't need mopping, there is definitely cheaper, nice, good robot vacuums. Alright, well, I saw this coming. Certainly, I'm gonna have to pause the recording and take a break here. Yeah. I haven't been feeling particularly super healthy lately. I'm not sure if that's bad food or what. So, but I'm just gonna go ahead and surrender on this, and I'll pause the recording, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I think what I want to try today is, since I took a break there and had the game just showing more Yu-Gi-Oh, and since I started later, I think I want to just move on to video game news. I don't really have a lot for the catch-up section anyways today, and if I'm not warmed up now, I'm not going to be warmed up at all today. I am seeing that there was a message here from a Elodia Hacks saying, where's Rethink game? Rethink is airing on my YouTube channel, so click on my name to get to my channel. Click on the videos tab and you should be able to see all the videos that have ever been posted, with the most recent ones being at the top. If it's not sorted that way, there's pull down to sort it that way. And the Rethink game latest episode came out just a few hours ago, so it is coming out. It is just the YouTube algorithm screwing over everybody by not notifying people. The suggestion to fix that, if anything is going to fix that, is to make sure you're subscribed to my channel, and then you click the notification bell to get all notifications on my channel, which is certainly asking a lot, because you will almost certainly get quite a few notifications there, and you still won't get all the notifications even if you do that. So the real move is to probably use the RSS feed, which also has too much coming out. Too many things are coming out because of the YouTube shorts in general, and there's just no way to filter out shorts other than me making a second channel, which is not something I'm willing to do at the moment. I suppose at some point in the future, if I did get monetized and did want to put a lot of extra work into my channel, I could make a second shorts channel, but then inherently I would just fall out of monetization and not get enough views once I moved the shorts to another channel. So hopefully that answers your question as far as Rethink. There is also a playlist tab on my YouTube channel, so for that there should be a playlist that is labeled Rethink. Some point in the distant future I might get rid of the playlist and just have playlists that say games that start with the letter R, and just alphabetize it to have a better, less messy system. But at the moment it's still a unique playlist for everything, so that is a way to also potentially follow, save for later, the playlist. Rethink in particular is an interesting game in that there is a George Lucas-like effect on Rethink, in that the original version of the game I found much more interesting, and so after I played the current version that is available, I played the whole game over in the original version, and it's very different. So it's effectively two games in one, and frankly I found the second game just way more interesting. And that's not even trying to understand the craziness that is Rethink 2, Rethink Evolved, and the many different variations of sequels and spin-offs of Rethink. If anything, I suspect they've sold the same game possibly multiple times. My macro is still somewhat broken, but I think I may have figured something out, so I'm gonna see if maybe that fixes things. But Video Games Chronicle, for instance, here I ran the macro twice, so I'm gonna go through some news and then I'll go through some other news. That says that a Battlefield 2042 x Dead Space crossover event is coming next week, which, yeah, I think that's EA fully committing to not caring about Dead Space, and very possibly not even really caring about Battlefield 2042, in the sense that they want them to feel like realistic games in their own universes. Sony has announced a new line of collectible PlayStation figurines, which this might be a hint as far as just the new leadership at Sony PlayStation, in that they're trying to sell toys. And I would say toys and collectibles around video games are at a pretty low peak. At a certain level, I would kind of argue that the slightly older kids are playing PlayStation. They definitely aren't playing Xbox. And while I would hope they were playing Steam Deck, that's not realistic to really believe that's happening. But I would imagine the slightly older kids are probably not collecting action figures and playing action figures. In fact, in general, I would say kids these days probably not collecting that many action figures in the first place. Collectibles and such. There's a shelf issue, both in Japan and in the West, as far as kids and adults just don't have a tendency to own shelves, and they don't have a tendency to have things that they put on shelves. So there is a display issue there, and these are posable little action figures. You can see by the knee joints in each of these, so they're not particularly good looking compared to more realistic static figurines. The prices here are kind of ridiculous at $30 and $50, when an action figure like this really should be selling for about $12 at most. And I would say none of these characters are that appealing. Inherently, when you're playing a video game, you've already got a action figure in the model in the video game that can do a lot more and pose a lot more. Breaking it down to the real world severely limits the range of motion and the animations you can get from it. And yeah, I would say that the Dad of War character here is probably the most interesting of all of them, and even in that form, he's not that interesting. And I guess maybe I might be off here, and maybe they are targeting these action figures to not 15, 16 year olds, which is what I was thinking. Maybe they're targeting 30, 40 years olds. But even at that, I think for the price, you would expect a higher quality of figurine that wasn't perhaps posable and was perhaps scaled up to be larger. These don't scream to me that they are particularly large scale images, and they definitely are still pushing Aloy, which also kind of highlights how Sony doesn't have a major new character, hasn't had a major new character in a while. Which is funny, because if they had had the little robot, which just announced a new game, and they come out with a little toy like that, that would have probably been more appealing. What this really feels like is that the new leadership at Sony / Sony PlayStation may just be some really old men who think that kids play with action figures because they played with action figures back when they were kids, 60, 70-year-olds, potentially thinking that that's the case, and it just really isn't the case. Pretty much all toys have disappeared, in part because Toys R Us went out of business in the West, in the United States, but also in part just because the iPhone exists and kids get an iPhone in their hands and they get streaming TV and they get video games so early in their life that there are just not a lot of demand for physical toys. Lego is about the only one exception there, and that's about it. That's not to say there aren't action figures. I'm just saying that action figures are generally now dollar store things that an aunt or uncle might buy for a kid who, when they really don't know what to buy, they aren't something a kid is likely going to want to purchase for themselves. Anyways, moving on. Apparently, the Watch Dogs movie has started production. The film is going to co-star Sophie Wilde from Talk to Me and Tom Blythe from The Hunger Games. It very, in my mind, my opinion is it's probably not going to have a major impact on the Watch Dogs game series. Like, I just don't expect to see a Watch Dogs 3 get greenlit and released. I guess it technically would be Watch Dogs 3, even though Watch Dogs Legion also came out. If anything, it would be perhaps an argument for a soft reboot of the now 10-year-old Watch Dogs 1 and a reboot of the series. Perhaps the movie could add a character and add some story. I can't even tell you who the main character is in Watch Dogs 1 or 2, and I think in Watch Dogs Legion the character you pick is completely custom created. You just make any character you want. And they were promoting that as a good thing when it really isn't. The movie might try and connect all of this to mean something more. On the other hand, it is also very dangerous now to make a movie or a game where it is a future where you're being completely surveilled by an evil government force, since that is only to be more likely true today than it was even 10 years ago. Sakaguchi isn't interested in revisiting Final Fantasy, Lost Odyssey, or Blue Dragon. Final Fantasy creator and Mistwalker boss is working on something new. That's very believable, but also I think he has separated to his own business, so I think he has no way in which he would ever be able to work on a Final Fantasy or a Lost Odyssey or a Blue Dragon game. I don't think he has any of the rights to any of those. And I am confusing in my mind the Blue Dragon series and the Dragon Quest series. Easy mistake to make, but I am recognizing that I was about to say this was a Dragon Quest game, and it isn't. It's Blue Dragon. It isn't much of a headline, though, to say what you're not doing. It's much more of a headline to say what you are doing. The Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy is reportedly coming to Game Pass in August. Good Old Games has added a new free game to its summer sale. The first Templar Special Edition is free to claim for 72 hours. This may be... Yep, you have until July 6th, 6 a.m. Pacific Time, to claim it in Good Old Games. Yep. We already talked about the UK man jailed for 4 months for carrying a 6-inch Zelda Master Sword in public. Still sounds completely crazy. He wasn't, as far as I could figure here, he wasn't even brandishing it. He was just fidgeting with it sheathed in his hand. And nobody complained for him having it. They clearly they're saying it. We have zero tolerance to belated articles in public. Says the Warwickshire Police Patrol Investigation Unit. But yeah, the only reason they even caught him is because to connect this back to Watch Dogs, there's so much closed caption, closed circuit television in the UK spying on anyone who is anywhere, basically in public, but frankly, probably looking through a lot of windows in what would be considered more private establishments too. So somebody on a camera somewhere, or probably a artificial intelligence, or not really artificial intelligence, probably a computer program designed to recognize things, flagged him before anything else did. And inherently that is the other imbalance of power of having just massive surveillance states, is that in the past there might be an argument that, well, they can't actually follow everybody, and you just have security through obscurity because they don't have enough people looking at the monitors that the cameras are connected to. Well, that's absolutely not the case now. There are many programs that can monitor people, track people, create long timelines of where you started your journey to where you ended, and they can pull that information up on demand later. Even a simplistic home security system like I have has motion censoring functionality that significantly reduces the amount of noise and video footage you might get of empty space where nothing is happening, down to just sections of time where movement is being seen. And it's pretty easy to have 18 cameras with motion detection cycling onto one monitor, so which would give you a multiplication force of 18 to 1, in that 18 citizens of the UK may be getting disenfranchised of a natural assumed privacy to one, like, security officer looking at a camera, or one perhaps paid employee, perhaps in a completely cheaper country like India, looking at a security camera. Unfortunately, this still isn't really video game related, other than it is just obviously a Master Sword toy. And honestly, depending on how sharp this was, I would be more than happy to give something like this to any, even relatively young kid, 12-year-old, I'd say. Yeah, I'd be more than happy with this. I'd probably consider what the state is as far as taking it to school. That's probably a mistake. There's too many crazy people, other crazy kids that might grab it out of the hand of a 12-year-old that you do trust to have them take it to school. But just around the house and outdoor activities and things like that, I would give much sharper tools to a kid. A lot of this news, I guess, is going to be repeated. Personal data of Spike Chunsoft's staff may have been leaked in a ransomware hack. A 2.5 rhythm action puzzle platform called Antro launches in 2025 for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. EVE Online makers are eyeing open source and blockchain technology for longevity, which I don't think EVE Online has ever released in a version 1.0, even now, but I might be confusing it with a different game. Very well might be. Them going open source. Well, it's 20 years old, so I guess maybe this is one that has actually released in at least a 1.0 version. Them going open source might be very welcome. Them engaging in blockchain nonsense, in contrast, would be something that I think would be very unwelcome. But also, it doesn't really matter what they think they say they might be doing or what they say they think they might be doing. It matters what they actually do. So this is basically just another form of an announcement for an announcement. Just pointless information. X-Gene Pool dev reveals a look at a scrapped Iron Man game. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was 2 or 3 Iron Man games that were in the works at some point, probably before the Marvel Iron Man movies started to become really popular. It is noticeable that the Disney Marvel movies really failed to have a lot of crossover promotion. Mostly they really failed to have crossover promotion to the comics. Like they basically, in what has probably been 10 years of Marvel movies, have convinced not a single person to actually read Marvel comics. I'm sure some people decided to read Marvel comics after seeing the movie, but I think Marvel and Disney did nothing with the movies to encourage that. If anything, they went out of their way to discourage it. It is questionable, much like the Superman game, as far as just how can you make an Iron Man game good. It's probably a Metroid Prime game would make the most sense. Samus Aran in her power suit is not very different from Iron Man in his power suit. So you could have an abilities at the beginning where Iron Man is all powerful in his ultimate form of the suit for the first game, and then he could get that suit damaged, and then he could be reduced down to just a like Mark 1 prototype of an Iron Man suit and work his way forward. Yeah. You would just need to figure out who the enemies are going to be and what the story is you want to tell. And I think that would work very well. And certainly it's not like Nintendo was churning out Metroid Prime games to compete with them. They certainly could have released 1 or 2 Iron Man games in between the last release of an Iron Man game and the next release of an of a Metroid Prime game and the next release of a Metroid Prime game. A study finds that co-op games keep growing in numbers and sales on Steam. Which, yeah. Unfortunately, I do think this is more of a case, though, that it is the top 1% of co-op games that catch on and get a large following, even if it's a large following only for brief amounts of time, which is arguably what I think in the long run you're going to say about things like Content Warning and Pal World, and even Helldivers 2 numbers are falling very quickly. It's not so much, I think, a case of all co-op games on Steam are just succeeding more. And I don't think it's a case that gamers overall want to just play co-op games and only co-op games. It's more of a case that most games, if they can be co-op, should have always been co-op. And it's just a matter of whether programmers can program the games to be co-op, and maybe it's a little easier these days to figure that out and for people to have internet. Yeah, in the United States there's still a decent number of people that don't have good internet, so as more people get good internet, co-op should obviously increase. Keywords is going to be acquired by the Swedish investor EQT at £2.2 billion valuation. Keywords is definitely one of the companies that GameDeveloper.com talks about a lot. They do surveys, I believe, and speak like they know anything, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. A lot of times these polls and estimations that come from people like Keywords just are completely unprovable and unable to be disproved either. So You never know. We never get the real numbers from the companies themselves. EA is sunsetting 3 Battlefield titles on Xbox 360 and the PS3. Also, Nintendo has shut down the repairs for the Wii U. Nintendo's clearly just working their way through anything old to shut down for the next console they release, which we're calling the Switch 2. And they're going to be so up against not having anything else to shut down that I think you're going to see just repair services, even for the Nintendo Switch, get shut down pretty quickly. And that might be the one thing that the new leadership at Nintendo does, is that they may have a very smart, a very different strategy. I won't say smart because it probably isn't, but they may have a very different strategy of just not supporting old hardware and pushing people to new hardware. Of course, you don't want that to become the narrative that all of a sudden every time a kid gets stick drift on the Switch, they can't get it fixed and they're throwing away a $300 Nintendo Switch because it's broken and unrepairable. That would create a lot of negativity around the Nintendo name, which Nintendo doesn't seem like they care if they create negativity around their name, but eventually if it starts showing up in the hearts and minds of the kids, then that's a problem. Right now, most of the negativity around Nintendo is smarter, more informed gamers who see them going after emulation, see them going after MIG switches and hardware mods and copyright claims and things like that, things that little kids aren't going to understand. And at a certain point, if Nintendo loses the power of Mario, they lose everything at that point. If there's a single generation that just says Mario is not cool, or Mario's the thing that my older brother thought was cool, so I don't think it's cool, they've got nothing. Then they'll create a generation with no nostalgia, and then that generation will not have their kids playing Nintendos, and then all of a sudden Nintendo would have to actually compete and would probably fail miserably trying to compete with the PlayStation as far as quality of the games. I also question whether Nintendo just isn't going to fail anyways, because they just don't have smart enough programmers who know how to program on modern engines and modern hardware. If the hardware in the Nintendo Switch is 10-year-old technology, even when it was released brand new, then that probably implies that everybody who worked on the Switch is 10 years behind in their own education as far as modern hardware and programming. So this is all the first time I ran the macro, and so there's not going to be really too much. Satisfactory is launching September 10th, which it's been in early access up until this point. What I think is wrong with my macro is that if I'm on an about blank page, when I click and open a new window, it may be that UI Vision can't actually act on that page, and I may just need to change the home page from about blank to, say, google.com, and that may solve the whole problem. But that's still kind of a bug, because yeah, it really should work, but it may be more of a Firefox thing than UI Vision. Here we can see Adult Swim has delisted more games and casting doubt on developers for reacquiring the rights. Yeah, I don't think Adult Swim had too many interesting games that they ever published or developed. They did seem like they were more silly one-off games. Super House of Dead Ninjas. Even in the title, you know, is kind of a silly type of game. But this also just highlights a problem of the fact that there's just no publisher to trust and no platform to trust as far as somebody out there always having a copy of a game available for purchase. And yeah, at this point, when a game stops being available for sale, it's my own personal belief that it should at that point become public domain. Maybe you give a 90-day waiting period, maybe you even give a 2 or 3 year waiting period, but you definitely don't give 30 years of copyright protection to people who are not actually selling the product. And there should be more laws to defend the concept of abandonware, which this software is effectively now abandonware, and the concept of if something is artistic in its creation, which video games definitely fall under that, it belongs to society in some way after it's been created, and there should not be a right of a publisher or a developer or the original artist that actually made the game to just hide it away forever, because that does not benefit society, nor does it really benefit the individual, other than giving them the right to hide something to disenfranchise everybody else on the planet. So yeah, we give copyright protection as a legally enforced right to creators so that they can make a living and not starve to death. If they're not selling their product, then they aren't making a living, and obviously they're not starving to death anyway, so at that point it really should just become public domain. Of course, corporations effectively fund the politicians who write the laws, and the politicians don't know anything about copyright in video games in particular. So that's probably never going to happen. At least unless something significantly changes. One of the things I've realized is once I can get the macro working again, I can probably rewrite it a little bit so that some of these extra tabs don't get left sitting around. Some of these tabs actually do make sense to be where they are, but a lot of them don't. Souvenirs doesn't look quite good enough. I'm all over the place as far as stories. The Famitsu sales from 624 to 630 have been updated, putting Luigi's Mansion 2 in the #1 spot, and Nintendo Switch mostly dominating the charts with Elden Ring for the PS5 and PS4, and then Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance for the PS5, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth down at 27th. Stellar Blade on the 28th spot. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 2 or 3 weeks that Stellar Blade just falls down below 30. But even at that, Stellar Blade is outselling Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble for the Nintendo Switch, which debuted at 30th. So undoubtedly some of that has just been poor advertisement on Sega's part, but it is also probably a case that particularly the Japanese audience have seen a lot of Super Monkey Ball games and they're probably a little bit tired of them. There's nothing new in this newest one that I could see that would make it feel interesting, and the game itself is already an anomaly as far as how it plays and controls. The best thing Sega could probably do is not release it for the Switch so much as release it for either the PlayStation gyro controls or the Steam Deck gyro controls, if all of a sudden you are projecting a monkey ball on the screen and you have to tilt a switch left and right, which there probably are gyro controls, they just didn't advertise it well enough for me to even know that. And on that thought, I guess if you had a 3D projector on a Steam Deck, that would be interesting, but I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, we've never been able to get that, any kind of projectors and holograms to be small enough to replace a flat screen. Even a little bit of depth of field would be more of a gimmick, though, also. And unless they could figure out a way to program some false depth of field into a 3D screen, which video games would be the best target to have that information. There could be an API for a foreground and background appearance. And the augmented reality glasses also are probably a good place where that would go. As far as hardware sales go, it looks to me like everything is just about the same every week. Sometimes the Xbox Series X sells particularly well, sometimes it seems like it sells a little less. Sometimes I wonder if it's just because they don't have any in stock in Japan. We really haven't had big announcements. Here we have Video Games Chronicle saying Sony's Horizon Netflix series is reportedly not moving forward. It's unclear if it will progress with a different creative team. And you can see they've once again picked as a screenshot the screenshot that Sony or the Horizon Zero Dawn team put on Twitter with the transgender pride colors all over her face, which they really doubled down on that to the ire of a small percentage of the audience. I would still suspect that 88% of the people who did not play Horizon 2 didn't play it because they just weren't that interested in the game before any of the controversy got doubled down on and complained about. I would say that compared to Watch Dogs, though a Watch Dogs movie, it's probably going to be less interesting than a Horizon TV series could have been, because I think the core conceit of robotic dinosaurs in the future does work as a more interesting concept than Watch Dogs, which is just that the world is being you're in a always observed state, being watched. But yeah, you inherently would have thought this might go through too because of the Horizon Lego game. This also highlights, though, that Sony has put a lot of effort to less success about promoting Horizon and licensing Horizon, in that there are Horizon Lego sets and a Horizon Lego game, and they were trying to do a Netflix series. And anytime you see a Netflix series not going forward, you should probably see Amazon Prime picking it up. I also heard that Dish TV, if you commit to 2 years of being on Dish TV, would give you a free Netflix account. Of course, a lot of people who have Dish TV have it because they don't have good internet, so that may not be very useful. And certainly committing to 2 more years of Dish TV is kind of crazy. But if you are in the rare situation where you actually are watching cable TV, or satellite TV in this case, and know you're going to stick with Dish for the next 2 years, then that might make sense. Of course, there are better versions. You could get a Tableau version 4 and get over the air signals if you can receive over the air signals with an antenna. Or you could get a tablet version 3, even cheaper, and then have a slightly different experience, but cheaper experience without free ad-supported television channels. You could get an HD home run box. You could have any number of smart TVs that have fast channels, free ad-supported channels. Freevee being Amazon Prime's one of that. Although Amazon Prime is now a paid ad-supported channel. But Netflix still has kind of a unique lock on their content that they've made specifically, and they don't have a lot of competition there. Depending on what you're looking for, Disney Plus might make some sense there. Amazon Prime, not a good argument, though, as the only streaming service. It's a decent argument as a secondary streaming service. Maybe Crunchyroll if you've gotta have anime, but I'm not even sure you're getting a great service there. Anyways, back to video games. Here is Video Games Chronicle saying Nintendo has officially ended Wii U repair support. Lack of available parts has been cited as the reason for the conclusion of the service. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the old parts here are completely missing. There are some mistakes in the Wii U that it would be interesting to see if we saw them reintroduced into the next Nintendo console, in the sense that there is a camera on the Wii U unit. There's confusion as to whether the Wii U unit is a portable device like the Switch, which it isn't. It has to be within a wireless distance of the dock. There is a what looks like a TV button here, TV control button, which that never really works. So having that button doesn't make any sense. I think controller layouts with analog sticks at the top are probably not what you want. I think at this point we are running into probably PlayStation agreements of analog sticks being at the bottom and buttons being at the top. The Steam Deck is a slight difference in that the analog sticks are inset, and then there's a D-pad to the left of the left analog stick and buttons to the right of the right analog stick, and then there is touchpads here and here that effectively act like analog sticks and do echo the PlayStation layout. There is a question about whether discs have any room to exist. It may very well be the case if the technology is old in the next Nintendo console, which it probably will be, that it will just have like maybe a 4K UHD playback capability, but that may just be the maximum of technology as far as disc technology goes. Maybe 100 gigabytes at most, whereas everything else has just given up the ghost of having really discs, or the next generation Xbox and PlayStation will probably give up the ghost on having discs unless they can invent a larger discs that hold 200 or 300 gigabytes. Otherwise, I imagine it will be closer to micro SD cards or just big hard drives and internet downloads. Let's see. I keep getting brought back every time I close a tab to my default Twitter feed, which maybe means I'm in the wrong place. This is an example of a tab I should just automatically close every time. Yeah. Here we have the SteamDB information, which we would have looked at that earlier. Looks like Banana is holding the 5th spot. And yeah, there's not really any announcements of anything new, so if Chained Together doesn't work its way up to the top 10, I imagine everything is going to stay about the same. And while I do believe this game, Space War, is actually a Valve game under a different title, and that it's being secretly run in beta, the leak and the rumor around that game has not really sped up the release of that game, so we may be seeing Valve's next game come out on Valve's time schedule, which is whenever they're ready to release it, which frankly that's probably how all companies should respond to rumors of new games. It's just ignore it completely and move on with their day-to-day activities. Can see Banana is dropping downward. Apex Legends is downward. The First Descendant. It feels to me like maybe I didn't get all of the information on this chart. We may end up going back to the chart later. That's just my video from Wednesday. Steam Summer Sale is still going on. The featured deep discounts are not really knocking my socks off. And pretty much everything on the front page still feels about the same. The only thing that might be surprising is if the 11th came by and the Steam Deck OLED versions went on sale instead of the LCD versions, and I just don't believe that's the case. Discover more in this interactive recommender. Interesting. They haven't done any new Steam Lab thing in a while. Also, Sackboy might be another action figure character that would make sense, but I don't think they're making any more Sackboy games anytime soon, at least. Yeah, the feeling here is that perhaps the summer sale has just lost its relevancy, and that maybe there is just going to be a better time to buy games on Steam, or maybe there just is never going to be a better time to buy games on Steam, and just whenever a sale is happening, which there are multiple sales that happen throughout the year, you're always going to get as good as you're going to get discounts. This is a very believable headline from GameDeveloper.com. An ex-Rockstar dev says that GTA Online got so big it killed GTA 5's story DLC, which, yeah, I think that was pretty much assumed if it hadn't been confirmed. I would argue that it very well may have killed GTA 6 too. We'll just have to wait until GTA 6 actually gets released. It may not have, though. Also, GTA Online may not be making as so much money, may not be so big now that it is the only thing that Rockstar could focus on. But I still, in general, question whether GTA 6 is the kind of game that will feel good when it gets released in, say, 2026 or 2025, whenever that happens. There is an argument that as the graphics get more realistic, the actions of doing violent actions like Grand Theft Auto may start to lose their appeal more and more. And there is an argument too that the generation that exists now is just not as much of an edgelord generation as previous ones are, and they may be too sweet. The kids may be too sweet to want to play GTA Online. Yep. Let's see, the YouTube CEO, he doesn't even mention that, it just says YouTube here, retweeted something here of interest. Oh yeah, that they have a sneak peek video to updating the erase song feature. This is a feature that's been around for a long time. You get a copyright claim on a song in a game or in your footage of anything, and then sometimes you could click remove song, and sometimes that would work. A lot of times it would mess up the audio pretty badly, but it's still better than just completely muting the audio, which was the other option. So they've worked on improving that, which definitely gives monetized content creators an excuse to potentially go back and try and undo anything they've done in the past and redo it with a new algorithm to maybe make it sound a little bit better. Although inherently, if you're not monetized, it's just pointless to do that anyways. You might as well wait. They may have an even better version of it later on. Slightly shocking to me, Warner Brothers has revealed a roadmap to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League Season 2, with new content launching July 11th. Which I wouldn't be surprised if this is a case where they are just accelerating the release of Season 2 to churn out whatever has already been made for it. It would be crazy if they were really doubling down on the game, because I don't think there's any way you're going to get people to play it. Now, I said in the very last stream on Wednesday that ScumVM has already made itself fully compatible with all the Scum Engine games, and that's an example of me shooting my mouth off without actually checking the facts, because Moonbase Commander, after I said that, has now been released, and it is a Scum Engine game from Humongous Entertainment. So this is the last Scum Engine from Humongous Entertainment, but at the risk of making the same mistake twice, I'm going to suspect that there still might be a couple Scum Engine games that they have yet to fully been compatible with, and this is them just announcing initial support. So I'm not sure this is really, finally supported and ready for public testing, so it could be patched. Let's see, we can see what Moonbase Commander looks like here. And yeah, definitely looks like an old Humongous game. It's not one that I remember ever playing, no. And at a certain level, if I was just going to purchase a bunch of old games, I'd probably do it in bundles like this. If I was just going to try and buy all the Humongous content. Apparently Humongous is now owned by Rebellion, so a lot of these games I think were made by other people. I always wanted to play this game, but it's never gotten reviewed well enough to justify it being relevant, and it is an unfinished game that ends on a cliffhanger. We have a GameDeveloper.com headline here where Nintendo's president says generative AI can be used in creative ways. Contrary to recent reports, Nintendo hasn't ruled out using generative AI technologies, but emphasized that games cannot be created by technology alone. There was a headline that was almost exactly the opposite of that, where Nintendo said that they weren't going to use generative AI. Arguably, I would say I suspect Nintendo doesn't know how to use generative AI. I don't know if anybody really knows how to use generative AI in a safe way that would keep them from being sued for copyright violations, or use it just in general on a day-to-day basis and process. I haven't messed around with like image generation anytime recently, but the last time I messed around with it, you really couldn't get the same images twice, or similar images. So it's very much a case where the generative AI just wouldn't be good for anything in motion. It might be useful for single screenshots or thumbnails and things like that, but if you're going to have a consistent artistic style, generative AI doesn't seem like it can really do that. And when there was a YouTube channel that scanned in a generative video AI using just footage from a single anime movie, even that really couldn't keep a consistent art style that looked good. The whole thing looked awful. But yeah, I definitely don't expect Nintendo to be at the foreground of generative AI. It would make a lot more sense for Microsoft to do that, because Microsoft is going to be pushing its own Copilot generative AI technology while doing that, and Sony inherently doesn't have anything like that, so Sony would have to partner with somebody if they were going to do that, or make their own engine, which I don't believe Sony really could do. Inherently, I think Nintendo also has this cover where a lot of their games, a lot of the content in their games is made by second-party developers, people they hire to work directly for them to make games. So those second-party developers might be using generative AI, where Nintendo can otherwise keep their hands clean of it and say, well, we didn't know about that, or that wasn't our decision. And then Nintendo has also added 7 more NES games to the Switch Online, leading to at least one YouTuber I see speculating about whether or not these are the last 7 NES games that Nintendo could actually get on Switch Online. You certainly could say you're probably scraping the bottom of the barrel when you're releasing Golf and Donkey Kong Jr. Math and more. Like these are not big ticket names. Donkey Kong Jr., Math and More, not the Donkey Kong Jr. game. There probably are a few more games for the Western NES lineup and the Famicom lineup that either will come or will just never come because of copyright reasons or content reasons, or just Nintendo not caring. There is also in my head, if the speculation, which is probably very baseless, but if the speculation is somewhat true that this is the last few NES games that Switch Online could possibly add, maybe Switch Online is just not coming over to the next Nintendo console, or it's coming over in a very different format. I wouldn't be surprised if something completely different is offered instead of just old ROMs. Or if you get Switch Online for free for 2 years when you buy the next Nintendo console, and then they feel no obligation to add any new content or do anything with it. It would be interesting, certainly, if the next Nintendo console just had a FPGA circuitry in it, or just better emulation circuitry in it in the first place. to the point where maybe the games would run even better. Although I haven't really seen anybody actually try and play the Switch Online NES ROMs and complain too much about them. It's mostly a case that they're missing features like rewind and save states and things like that seem to be lackluster on Switch Online, not that they emulate incorrectly. It would probably make more sense if the next Nintendo console was just way more capable of emulating later things. Let's see, such as the Nintendo 64, which would be very hard. I could see having custom circuitry to emulate the Nintendo 64 or the GameCube, some of the later Nintendo consoles. So that's what I ran as I was testing out my macro on Wednesday. Here's the Video Games Chronicle that I ran earlier today in the morning. We have a podcast from GameDeveloper.com, from VideoGamesChronicle.com, which I don't care about, so we'll close that. Elden Ring's patch 1.12.3 nerfs Bloodfiend's arm and other popular weapons. I imagine Elden Ring players aren't going to be super happy about that, but they may just see it as a challenge. Exoprimal seasonal content is ending, Capcom confirms. Previous content will return starting next week for the foreseeable future. I had forgotten about this Exoprimal game where dinosaurs in large masses were going to attack you and you were shooting them in robot mech suits. There was some initial interest certainly on Exoprimal, but I don't think it sustained a big enough audience for a long enough amount of time. I certainly have not been seeing Exoprimal on the Steam top 10 played games. Yep. Inherently, there's just so many games, nothing is hitting. And so the amount of money that companies, particularly like Capcom, want to see as a return are just highly unlikely to actually be returned. Games just need to be made cheaper, and Exoprimal might have been one of those games that was made cheaper, but still wasn't made cheap enough. Cut dialogue was found for Shadow of the Erdtree final boss. It's unknown if it's possible to trigger the lines in game. I still understand nothing about the story of Elden Ring. I don't even know if there is actually a ring. Which, yeah, you would think that I would at least know if there's an actual ring like Lord of the Rings. Although, in fairness to against Elden Ring, Lord of the Rings says rings, and you really only follow one ring in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. GTA 5 story DLC was scrapped because GTA Online was a cash cow, Cinematics editor claims. It's funny how they say Cinematics editor instead of actually naming the person until you get down to that third paragraph. Joseph Rubino. I feel personally like people should have their names used way more. Name and shame, name and claim fame should be the stats. People shouldn't be hidden down in the third paragraph. They are being named, certainly, but yeah. If you're coming out publicly with a public statement, even if you're just posting on Twitter, you should be held to a standard that people are going to know your name, and you're going to build or lose your reputation on your claims. Yep. And I personally think that even goes to like McDonald's workers' badges and things, is that there should be full names on those badges. Although I understand where they're afraid somebody's going to stalk somebody, but frankly, you could take a picture of anybody with a camera phone at this point and figure out who they are. So just having full first and last name on a employee's badge makes sense. Of course, a lot of name and shame has also integrated into cancel culture, and I don't really side with that thought. I do think people should know what people did, but I also think people should be more forgiving and more realistic and not just devolve into this person did something bad at some point in their life, therefore they should never work ever again and starve to death effectively, which is what cancel culture seems to promote. Back to video games, the co-development studio Tosei, is how I'm going to pronounce it, reports losses due to multiple canceled games. Cancellations made by client publishers are having a knock-on effect. They have a screenshot here of a Final Fantasy group, so I assume that implies that they had at least some contracts that got canceled for Square Enix. Recently, they've worked on Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door remake, Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Scarlet Nexus, WarioWare, Move It, and Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. So that would imply to me that I think it was 30 games that Square Enix canceled. Some of those, at least one of those, I would suspect was with Tosei. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo canceled a project or two with Tosei also. Sony's Horizon Netflix series is reportedly not moving forward. We already talked about that. A Japanese Sonic X Shadow Generations website is teasing a fourth playable character. The game is going to be released in October. Which, okay. I imagine it's not going to be anything too interesting there, except for the people who are super Sonic fans. Nintendo is officially into Wii U repair support. F-Zero 99 adds festival events, emotes, and store rivals, which is interesting because I would have leaned more to believing that F-Zero 99 would have been just announcing it that it was going to shut down, since I think at least two other of the 99 series of games have been the blank 99 games have been shut down. That experiment certainly was not warmly embraced by Nintendo, so it is definitely hard to believe that we're going to see a lot of 99 style games released on the next Nintendo console, unless there's just some hardware reason why 99 games didn't work in the long run. Let's see, PlayStation is fully returning to the Tokyo Game Show, which noticeably they skipped Gamescom. So this is probably another major point of revelation in that the two new presidents of Sony Interactive Entertainment, being, I think both of them being Japanese, are bringing back what I was calling Sony of California to feel at least a little bit more like Sony of Japan or PlayStation of Japan. They haven't had a major presence since 2019, so the whole Jim Ryan era is being changed, which will probably give a little bit more life to the Tokyo Game Show, which inherently I just haven't. I've been following it for 2 or 3 years now, and I haven't seen anything new. Really announced there. Yep. So yeah, this may also be an indicator that we're going to see less state of plays from Sony online in favoring to going back to the old model of doing things and having presentations at trade shows and game shows. Let's see, we already talked about Nintendo adding 7 more NES games to Switch Online. We already talked about the Guild of Justice League Season 2. We already talked about this too. And oh, there's more details here from GameDeveloper.com. The Horizon series appears to have stalled at Netflix as the showrunner is accused of abuse. Alright, now, inherently, anytime the phrase abuse needs to be used, I want to know some more details. Was he rude? Did he yell at people? Did he spit on people? Did he slap people? Did he grope people? Did he sexually harass them? Verbally? Physically? Did he... what did he do? Or what is he accused of doing? Accused of abusive behavior in the workplace. Which inherently that was almost everybody in movie, TV making. It was very much a culture of abusive behavior, some of which frankly needed because actors and other employees kind of are babies and nothing would ever get made. The phrase that's commonly said, it's a miracle that anything gets made. There's just too many people working on a project. The show was being developed by the Umbrella Academy showrunner Steve Blackman. It's no longer moving forward. He had been offered a $50 million development deal to adapt PlayStation's Apocalyptic Dinosaur, whatever. And to bring another sci-fi show called Orbital to life. I thought they were going to do another season of Umbrella Academy. Numerous accusations by former employees of fostering a toxic workplace where he allegedly discriminated against employees, claimed credit for scripts he did not write, and retaliated against those who spoke up against his behavior. Okay, well, there is at least in SAG-AFTRA a process to go to arbitration for claiming credit for scripts you didn't write. So that can be dealt with and is dealt with, I imagine, very well, assuming that this is a SAG-AFTRA gig, which for Netflix maybe it isn't. So inherently, without any real details and not having any way to believe one person versus another, this could be just some disgruntled former employees who very well might be a little too SJW and they got fired for being bad at their job and now are claiming to have been discriminated against. All we can really do is probably give Blackman the benefit of the doubt and say that he has denied the allegations. Inherently, the argument against Horizon as a video game has been that the SJWs have taken over as far as the Horizon game series, or were always in charge as far as the Horizon series, but they just became more irate against the smallest amount of online complaining. And yeah, instead of just ignoring the whiners online, they made a much bigger deal of it, and Streisand affected it. Those type of SJWs that seem to run Horizon may be also involved in part, or may have at least found similar people in former employees. And inherently, I think these accusations come about so much that saying a toxic workplace just immediately makes me disbelieve the claims. It needs to be something where they either physically did something to somebody, or they have a long, provable pattern of discriminating against people. You really need receipts to make these kinds of claims for somebody outside of the loop to, like me, to really want to believe it. Yep. Let's see. Moving on. Ubisoft is still trying to make NFTs happen. French publisher has partnered with Double Jump Tokyo to bolster Web3 integration on the upcoming multiplayer RPG Champion Tactics. Then we already talked about Nintendo saying that they may use generative AI and ending Wii U support. And then we talked about EVE Online makers eyeing open source and blockchain technology for longevity. And then that is going to bring me to all of the games that came out on Steam. This definitely feels like an old game that very well may have been released a long time ago. But it is also always the problem that that a lot of these games are brand new, and I think this may very well be a brand new game, and there really is just no room for that kind of visuals. I don't know if there really is even room for this game, the final act, but I'll give it a chance. I was a couple of days ago having a allergy reaction, and yeah, I still am every few hours starting to feel a little itchy. And the funny thing here is I have air filters. I just haven't used them in a long time to do like room filters that would add more noise when I'm recording. Here we have yet another. This is the third banana clicker game I've seen so far. And yeah, there's, I guess, a question about the air filters that I have that are probably about 12 to 15 years old, and so the HEPA filters that are in them and the carbon pre-filters may not be good enough to get all allergens out of room, and may very well just shoot allergens into the air, making the situation worse. So far I've been just taking antihistamines, but I'm taking ones that don't last very long, so yeah. It's an interesting experience in that I've never broken out in hives before, and it seems like everybody at some point possibly is going to do that, but now I'm just getting kind of itchy in certain spots. Usually spots where I already had a sore or a scab. Yeah, I was fairly concerned about that. Less concerned about it now. I'm very much now just trying to get back in the habit of. Yeah, I'm gonna give this a chance just because the name is Amber Alert. Let me just double check what I'm seeing here. Because I've sped up the whole. Yeah, I think this is a little too gory for me to actually make a YouTube short on it. So I'm gonna say no to that one, but I will put it on the follow list and see if something happens there. Here we have a dress-up game. There's been a shocking lack of these kinds of games on Steam. You would think they might be fairly easy and that they might happen quite a bit to try to appeal to girls. I think there's probably a assumption even now that girls are not as girly as a lot of the girly games once were. That's a bad way of explaining that. Suffice it to say, the horse racing, the dress-up dolls, the paper doll things, all those were more sexist over feminization thoughts that were pushed onto girls for hundreds of years in the past. Whereas when not held to a different standard, a little girl probably wants to play just about the same games as a little boy wants to play. And we definitely see things like that in the case of, say, the Princess Peach game, Princess Peach Showdown, that came out, and that game did not get a major reception. That there just isn't some secret collection of gamer girls that don't know they want to be gamer girls yet, that just needed a female role model to play as on the Nintendo Switch. Here we have yet another clicker game. Inherently, I kind of expect that the gendered activities for little kids, like horse riding and paper dolls and things like that, more of that really has to do with how little boys are pushed away and forbidden from doing those things. I imagine if there was no social pressure or stigma to it, little boys and little girls of the same age would all want to ride horses and might want to do paper doll stuff at just about the same lower levels, regardless of gender. Of course, that is an experiment that cannot ever be proven or disproven because social pressures do exist and stigmas, unless you're gonna shoot a couple of kids off in a rocket ship to a new planet, which that would be unethical. But I can certainly speak to my experience as far as games go, and yeah, you run into games like this which would probably be good for any young kid, and it's just too boring to really make a YouTube short on it. Well, actually, I'm gonna undo that statement and take it back, because it is a free game and it isn't claiming to be an educational game. It does feel like it is almost nothing as a game. You almost would expect this to be a student project of some sort, and you definitely would expect it to have like mobile versions of the game, which it does. I'm always looking for more educational games, but there's a certain plateau there in that. Here's yet another game with banana in the name. Probably Clicker. Yep. Although it looks like they may be using AI to generate at least more interesting, consistent thematic images of monkeys with bananas. Still gonna be a no. Yeah, there's just a plateau in my mind as far as educational games, that at best you're gonna get something like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which is crazy that there isn't a game like that exists now, even though it would have to constantly be updated. It is still kind of insane that there isn't a new version of that. I don't believe this supports English. But I'd say that's about the highest level of educational as you can get. Minecraft educational mode maybe might be a little bit higher. There are some programming games that I guess technically might be considered educational, but unless you care about learning programming, if you don't care about that, you're not going to learn any other kinds of things. None of the World War II shooters are going to get over the hump of being too violent to be educational. Really. Most video games would play fast and loose with any real history if they were going to try and be even slightly educational. Here's another clicker game, I believe. Yep. You see one clicker game get into the top 10 list, and then for weeks, probably months, we're going to see low effort clones as if nobody else thought of it. Here's another clicker. And yeah, we've been seeing Backrooms clones for months. It makes a lot of sense after Control as a game came out, after SCP as a website came out. It makes a lot of sense that if the Sci-Fi Channel actually bothered to make any new shows, or frankly if any TV production anywhere or streaming production bothered to make any shows, but particularly sci-fi, that they have the whole Warehouse 13 concept there, and effectively the Warehouse 13 is SCP. So you could have a spiritual successor to Warehouse 13, take all of the good episodes from Warehouse 13 and just convert it, take all of the good SCPs on the website and use them. I think those are public domain based on the way the website's set up. It would just make all the sense in the world to have a TV show, either based on Control, which no real reason to do that, or just based on SCP. It works as a concept. And in fairness, it's not even like SCP is an original concept, because there's Friday the 13th, the TV series, which has nothing to do with the Friday the 13th movies, really. But yeah, in that TV series, there's a bunch of magical items that are evil and have to be collected. Although inherently it just drives, it's just crazy to me that Sci-Fi Channel exists at all, in that they, I don't believe, are creating any new content. Like, it's probably been a couple years since I last looked, but yeah, the real estate show might be the only show that they've created recently. I watched that on Hulu. I'll give this a chance. I'm gonna be really generous there. I haven't seen a lot of Metroidvania games recently. Here's yet another clicker. Honestly, Steam has to integrate some kind of system. Probably a fairly unfair system. Something along the lines of, if one style of game gets into the top 100 games, it's going to be given special consideration and protection so that it is not considered, it is not just copied. Inherently, what you could do is you could say the Steam Direct system of publishing, which is right now just completely open and not really regulated in any ways. You could say that if you were going to publish a game via Steam Direct, it is going to have to be significantly different from the top 10 games that from some top 10 trending list that Steam has, like a top list there, just to stop copycats. And I think they have something like that in their agreement already, but the enforcement there seems to be pretty lackluster. But yeah, if we could just stop clones of low effort games, we'd just get down to low effort games at that point. The hope here would be that Skull Invitation would only hurt one person and not hurt the other. But that's not how this works. Yeah, weirdly here, I'm noticing that I'm only going about 2 hours, and so I've come back and played Yu-Gi-Oh! Some more. I do probably need to play a little bit more Yu-Gi-Oh! So I might as well just do it online, but I also am weirdly at the end of all the news. Now, I did run my macro earlier this morning, so it does behoove me to just double check and go to Twitter and see if any new news or new posts have come up, so we can just be as close. For instance, the Bandai Namco Summer Showcase at Anime Expo begins in 25 minutes. The other issue certainly is probably a case that it is, well, yesterday was July 4th. It is July 4th weekend in the United States, and so that may have severely limited the amount of news too. Because yeah, I'm looking at my Twitter feed here and not seeing a lot. That being said, I also kind of feel like my macro screwed up once again and did not open anything from Komatsu. So let me double check Komatsu's news feeds. And see what we can find. Yeah. It really is just kind of multiple failures seem to be happening here. Now I think really what happened here is that not too much actually happened. I don't know if it's my ears are clogged or what, but the music doesn't sound particularly loud today on Yu-Gi-Oh! Either. Which is probably fine. Now, there's definitely a whole page here of new news. And Gamatsu is basically my default news source at this point. They're by far the most helpful news source. It's annoying though when I look at games on the curator feed here and it's just coming soon or it's games I've already seen. The curator feed isn't just all new stuff, which is what I would like it to be. So down here on Yu-Gi-Oh! Just destroy these two cards. Well, you have something like this that's mixed reviewed, and frankly, I'd like Atelier of Resale Arena to have been a better received game, but it just wasn't. So it's just no reason to play them. And on a rare occasion, you might see something new, but I am certainly in a weirder position than most, where I've seen and probably remember a decent amount of other things. So it's hard for the algorithm to show me anything new when I've seen everything. It definitely isn't a case where I want more games. It's a case where I want better games by far. This is kind of shocking, the Jackbox Party Pack 10 being mixed reviewed. Yeah, there's nothing particularly super interesting there. A lot of garbage games. And yeah, during the summer sale, just going through this so that you can unlock trading cards, which you'd probably need about 5 of them, and you'd almost certainly have to trade to use them all. Probably could have sent both of these cards back. So can I one turn kill here? That is going to be the question. Something this. Activate its ability. Summon this. I don't think I have quite enough cards. See, all I could do is summon a 3 card if I was going to do that, which would be 2,300. So it's better to just attack. Then summon. I guess it's just as surprising that there haven't been really any other good SCP ripoff games. And that is an interesting question certainly to ask, as far as why is it a case that only the low effort games are being ripped off by why are only low effort games being ripped off on Steam? Yeah, why are the AAA game concepts not being ripped off? I guess they just know that they can't succeed at beating anything with any real quality behind it. Let's go through all these Gematsu articles. BXI is going to exhibit at BitDrift Summit with 2 unannounced titles. Genshin Impact version 4.8 update Summertide Scales and Tales launches July 17th. Let's see. Let's see. Oni is coming to the Switch and Steam on July 26th. Let's see if we've done something here. Boy, it is not the game I was expecting in that screenshot. Metaphor ReFantagio has a story trailer on Gematsu.com. Legend of Heroes Trails Through Dawnbreak 2 is coming to the West in 2025. Meanwhile, I'm getting my butt handed to me. He's able to do something here which allows this guy to attack multiple times, apparently 3 times. Number of fusion monsters used to summon it. Well, this is certainly enough frustration here to not play any more Yu-Gi-Oh! On screen. Edo Zero, or Edo Zombie Uprising, PS5 Physical Edition launches October 10th in North America. Raging Bites PS5 and Switch Physical Editions launch December 12th in North America. Might as well activate these cards. They're not going to do anything other than get the data quest done. Yeah, you'd think winning 3 games would just be easy, but it really isn't. Not when you've got other people trying to win 3 games desperately too. As far as missions, activate a trap card, still not one. But yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. Zero the Dance Hero is coming to the West in November. It's a rhythm exercise game for the Switch. This is an art style that looks like it really is not going to stand up to the test of time as far as 3D CGI. It's probably a great example of something that should just be 2D. If you can do 2D better, do 2D. Don't try for 3D. In a lot of ways, it feels like it's almost 2D anyways, but it's on a 3D wire frame. 7 Scarlet for the Switch is coming to the West in 2025. I assume this is a visual novel. Let's see. Mistonia no Kibou, The Lost Delight, is coming to the West in 2025. I assume this is also a visual novel. It's a Otome, young maiden vision novel. Yep. Utakata no Uchronia is coming to the West in 2025. It too, I assume, is a visual novel. Yep. Blazing Strike launches October 17th for PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC via Steam. They don't seem to have a Steam link. Looks like a fighting game. Which, a new fighting game from a new series is kind of interesting. What's the company behind this? Access Games as the publisher. Rare Breed makes games. See if we can maybe see a trailer here. See if it actually plays. Last stream, the videos were not playing. And so that just also implied to me something is going wrong. And it definitely seems like that is the case. Something is going wrong here. Something broke with the latest Firefox update. Furche Evermore, Epic Lycoris launches November 7th in the West. I assume this is also a Otome visual novel. Despair Drops launches in the spring of 2025 in the West. So quite a list of visual novels. For as many visual novels that get released, you would think they were more popular than I think they really are. And honestly, I don't think they're really that popular in the West. Anyways, that being said, it isn't that hard to do a relatively decent, quick and dirty translation. And in general, a Japanese visual novel may already have an English translation so that they can sell it to the secondary markets of other Asian countries such as Korea and China, and it's just extra money to then release it to the West. I am not super surprised that visual novels aren't super popular because reading in general is just not that popular in the West, and visual novels don't have a very good clear path in which you could get kids into reading. I doubt any parent would be considered wise to start encourage their kids to read visual novels as a way of encouraging their reading skill. While that might work, just the amount of violence and implied sex and romance in visual novels is just more mature than the age range of kids that should be encouraged to read is. And so yeah, they don't really have a good collection of kid-friendly visual novels. It would make more sense to get kids into reading to have them read certain mangas, but most mangas also have problems. Even the original Dragon Ball manga has some dirty jokes and things that would not really fly. So maybe the Pokemon mangas and comics are about the only thing I can suggest for young kids to get into reading that way. And it's still not reading, it's still a lot of pictures compared to words. Here, the article we're actually looking at says Dragon Ball Z Kakarot shipments and digital sales have topped 8 million. And here we can see quite a collection of characters from Dragon Ball Z. A lot of which I don't know if all of these really did show up in the Dragon Ball Z original anime, but this might be a bit more expanded. In particular, I think this is Vegeta's daughter, and I'm not sure she showed up, and this girl may have never shown up either. This boy or girl, I can't even really tell, may have not shown up either. Obviously some of these characters did show up, but they are somewhat lesser known characters if you're just a casual fan, and some of the outfits here and appearances may be off. Dragon Ball Z is still really popular, obviously. Heaven Burns Red has an English version now announced. It's a free-to-play story-driven RPG published by Yostar for PC and smartphones. Really should not be in the realm of looking for yet another mobile phone game to waste my time on, but getting in early on something that might be interesting might work for me. The Jun Maeda is a Japanese writer and composer, and he considered a pioneer of visual novel, and his notable works include Air, Colonnade, Little Busters, and Angel Beats, all pretty big names in the visual novel anime, and a lot of those did get turned into animes afterwards. So yeah, this could be an interesting thing. Of course, all the mobile games I play that are RPGs basically need to be on auto mode. They need an auto button for me to really play them. I don't actually want to sit on my phone and tap a bunch of buttons. And it is perhaps saying something that we're seeing in this picture and kind of in the picture before, that the newer generations of Japanese characters are leaning to more heroines than used to exist. Although, in fairness, anime and manga and visual novels have always been pretty good about having heroines as the protagonist. It's way, way worse when you look at who the heroes are in Western stories, cartoons, games, in the past in particular. Old School Rally launches in early access on July 19th, which, yeah, we'll see if that's on the follow list. This may be a little bit too rough of a game, but I still want to hold to the rule that if something bothers to make a news press release that gets to Komatsu, I should make a YouTube short based on it, on that fact. Guilty Gear Strive Duel Rulers airs in 2025 and has a teaser trailer. This is an anime based on the Guilty Gear franchise, which I think is a fighting game franchise. So, video game adjacent. There's something weird about when I open new tabs right now. It is opening the new tab like 2 spaces to the right, which you would think it would be impossible. And yet it's happening. 1 space to the right makes sense. 1 space to the left makes sense. All the way to the left makes sense. All the way to the right makes sense. 2 spaces to the right, it makes no sense. Ys 10 Nordics launches October 25th in the West. Let's see. I'll make a new YouTube short around that. And then Ribby Platinum Edition for the PS4 and Switch launches October 24th. What kind of game is this? It's an action adventure side-scrolling platformer. I need to investigate why these videos are not playing. It might be that Google has finally just made it impossible to have any kind of ad blockers running at all. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of bugs I need to investigate, and footage to make, and videos to schedule, and just an extremely long list of other things that need to be done, both YouTube and not YouTube related. So, anyways, we now have gone through the Komatsu articles too, so I feel like we've covered as much news as possible, and we still haven't gone 3 hours. And honestly, me going shorter probably makes for better content anyways. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.